Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I'm Audley Stevenson. Our continued goal is to help you live your best audacious life ever, and I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend it here with us. Hey, look, we're on social media. You know the deal. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe, like, follow, share our YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and be a part of all the great action in terms of the Audacious Living Podcast. Now, we're in for a great show today. We're going to spend some time talking about the culture of generosity, and I'm going to explain that to you in just a bit. But before we do that, I want to get into a quote by the great Dr. Maya Angelou that she left with us before she left this planet. I mean, she left us many beautiful words, but this is one of the quotes that I love from her when she was reflecting on the lessons that she learned over the course of her life. And what she had said is, I've learned that you shouldn't go through life with a catcher's mitt on both hands. You need to be able to throw something back. And one of the reasons why I think this quote is amazing is because it's an excellent reminder that life is a two-way street. And as much as we receive and accept from people, we should be looking to give back and uplift others as well. I think of the analogy of the back catcher in the game of baseball, whose main job is to catch pitches from the pitcher. But given that, bearing that in mind, back catchers wear one glove so they can throw back the pitch after they receive it. And I think that's a great analogy about what life really should be about. I explain all that because it brings us to today's episode, where we'll talk to April Shprintz about a concept that she's developed called the generosity culture. And really at the core of the generosity culture, it's really about investing or giving to others, whether that be through our time or our energy. And the key is that we're doing this without expecting anything in return. And so April's going to expand on that a bit more, and she'll also share a personal story from her life, from someone who actually invested in her at a young age, and she'll talk what that ripple effect had on the rest of her life. When we talk about the ripple effect and what it meant, well, she took it into the business world and it helped her, and she works with companies, and it helped them to scale and improve their cultures, which in turn led to increased revenues, which at the end of the day is a desire for any business. So now that we have the table all set, it's time that we hear from April Shprintz and the generosity culture. Enjoy. April Shprintz is a business accelerator, speaker, author, and founder of the generosity culture, which is a concept where companies and individuals can have huge success by simply pouring into others. April learned at an early age that the more you give, the more you succeed. She's since built that philosophy into her life and business practice and shows leaders the value in creating a culture of generosity. April is up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. So, thanks. So maybe we can just kind of get started. This is a conversation, April. We call them interviews, but these are just conversations about topics that I think we both find appreciation in. So that's why I'm glad to have you here. And let's just sort of jump right into this. The generosity culture is something that you've developed that certainly resonates with me, and I think with a lot of people when you talk about a culture of generosity. I wonder if you sort of can talk about sort of the impetus for that or where that started for you.
Absolutely. So it was actually something that happened to me before I ever thought to create it. There was a woman that worked with my mother. She was the head of human resources at the factory where my mother worked. and she came into our home one day to help my mom go to rehab because she had self-identified as having an issue at work based on missing a lot of work and having an alcohol problem. So she came to our home, which was really amazing because she didn't have to do that. She could have had someone bring my mom in, but she knew that she had a small daughter and she wanted to be there when that news was communicated and those changes happened. And so not only did she come into, what was a very emotional situation, and that couldn't have been a good time for anyone, but she also took me aside and said really encouraging things along the lines of, this feels like a bad thing, but what your mother is doing is very brave. And then went on to say that she thought I was special. And at this time in my life, I had never met anyone like her. She was very professional, she was very successful, and I was amazed by her. And this belief that she had in me that I could do special things really, for me, was the impetus for taking a chance on things and going after things. So, in that moment, I had this wonderful belief from her, which was amazing, but I also then had this desire to be someone else's Sue Harper. And that stayed with me for years in life. And then it became the way that I did business because she invested in me. She wrote me letters. She came to my school events, etc. And it really, to me, resonated as a way to make someone feel valued and important. And it carried with me throughout everything that I did.
It sounded like April that she almost sort of took on a mentor role for you. Is that?
Absolutely, absolutely. She's actually still a really good friend of mine. She is in her late 80s and we still talk. I still go see her.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so at the time, so you were this started at the age of 9. Did you sort of recognize what was happening to you in terms of what she was doing in that moment, or it was just just a friendly adult, if you will? I'd imagine at that age, you're not making that distinction of what's really going on, or are you?
No, not at all. I mean, I was incredibly grateful. I was so excited to know her and really the worldview that she expanded me to, right? By doing that, the things that I could see, the opportunities that led to. And I knew that it was an amazing thing, but I didn't understand at that time that I was being mentored. I didn't understand really how valuable it was.
So when you make that leap, and now and again, these are you talk about things that sort of resonated with you throughout your
Mhm.
life. Sort of when did that connection or spark? When was that made for you?
So it's interesting. I made it at an unconscious level very early on. So whenever I would be in a business situation where things were a mess and people would say, "Oh, April's really good at bringing, cleanliness to this and organization." What was interesting is what I would do is very much what Sue had done to me: ask questions, listen, see how I can help. And over time, that built my career in the corporate world. And then when I started my own firm, I was still using that same method to help businesses scale and turn them around. And it was literally an outsider who put it together for me and said, "Do you realize that you're just giving and giving and giving and you're teaching them to do it? And that is what is accelerating their business. It's like you're building, this entire culture of generosity." And I was like, "Ooh,
Ding.
yes, let's check Google." Let's see if anyone's saying it that way. Because, it's not a new idea. It's an idea positioned a different way. And so maybe it'll resonate with people a little more because it's different. And then it's proven out because I think it is very counterintuitive for a lot of leaders and CEOs and business owners to think, so wait a minute, I can pour into people and my clients, and that's how I'm going to be more financially successful. Are you sure? Yeah, I can show you.
It's interesting because it very much falls from as you talk about it. I think I'm seeing the concept of giving to get, right? But you
Mhm.
don't give just to get. And I feel the
Mm-mm.
distinction between the two that I think oftentimes are confused. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, 100%. And I will tell you that people can feel your intent. So whether you're selling or you're looking to help someone, when you're doing it with the intent to get something back, people can feel that it doesn't feel genuine. So giving to get does not work People will talk about the law of reciprocity, etc. That doesn't work when it feels manipulative. And if you give to get, there's this level of underlying manipulation that people can feel. Now, if you give just because, candidly, it feels great to give, and if you can trust that the rest will take care of itself, and it will, lots will come to you. It's just not going to be an agreement, like a tit for tat kind of thing, right? You're going to give in all these different areas, yet things come back to you in ways you never would have expected. And it's letting go of that expectation that this time that I'm giving of my time, this time that I'm helping someone out, is going to directly result in something for me.
Got you. When we talk, so we've been talking about giving, right? And I would think that a lot of times it's the little things that we're talking about, right? Sure, money and resources are great things to give as well. But the true, I think they're limited. It's just sort of, when we talk about long-term impacts, and so if you talked about Sue as the example and what she did for you in the long term. So we're not just talking about money, right?
No, we're not really talking about money at all. It's funny. When I used to say, instead of pour into your employees and your clients, I'd say invest in, and people would grab their wallet. They'd be like, "Oh man, I don't know how I feel about this."
Right.
So it's why I use the term pour in, because I actually want something far more valuable than money. I want, because that's what's going to reap those rewards over and over again. And what's so amazing about it is, especially from a leadership perspective, when you pour into your employees and you give them that mentoring, you give them that time, two things happen. The first is they're going to model you with your clients. They're going to take even better care of the people who are most important to your business, or I would say second most important, because I think your team is actually the most important, but they're going to model that. And then even better, they're not going to be able to help from modeling that at home, whether it's with their partner or their children or whomever it is they interact with. So then their life outside of work is going to get better as well. And as much as people like to think those things are separate, they really aren't. And I think the pandemic has shown that a ton. If you have a good home life, it's easier to have a good work life. Well, what if the way that we're helping you from a work perspective could also help personally?
Got you. And I'm so glad you sort of touched on the outside of work aspect, because so much of what we talk about is within that work context. But we're the same person. We don't become a different person at work and come home with the same. Our lives intersect with one another. So the things that we're talking about very much can apply to our personal life as well as our professional.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's really the benefit of it, because our employees, our team members, the folks that we work with, they're not widgets, they're not variables, they're
Right.
people. And the better their life is overall, the better we all show up together.
Got you. So, we spent a lot of time talking on this podcast about boldness and the importance of boldness. And when we talk about stepping out to display generosity, I would imagine there's certain aspects of boldness, or maybe even the word courage I'd use as well, to put yourself out there. So you could talk about the intersection between the two, because there's some relevance, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, I think it takes some boldness to do something that is so counterintuitive. I remember when I was in the corporate world and I was in different sales roles, and the way that I would quote unquote sell seemed counterintuitive to a lot of people. They gave me a little bit of side eye. Right way to do things. Closing, what I have could help you. And if you do, I'd love to give that to you. And with that exchange of value, you'll pay me. And then if it didn't help them, I was happy to stop those conversations and go on to the next person. I didn't believe in trying to wear somebody down for a sale. And anytime I came to an organization, I was new to the organization, people found the way I sold very weird. But it usually proved out in a really big way in about a year, because then business was just coming to me. I wasn't prospecting anymore, because people knew that if I could help them, we would do business. And if I couldn't, I'd even refer my competition sometimes and say, I think they're a better fit. And it takes a lot of boldness to be generous in that way because it flies in the face of some of the ways that we've been taught to do business.
Right. Well, you're taking a chance, right? It's really what you're doing, and if that chance involves extending to someone else, again, within a business context, you don't do that. You're supposed to crush the competition. That's what it's about, right? But no,
You know, I had a gentleman who's been very successful in business and owns his own company. And he told me, he said, business is war. And I'm a former service member. I'm like, no, it isn't. It's a cooperation.
competition. I love that. We talk about what's going on in the world around us. And last, we everyone knows the impact of 2020, and I think within a lot of what we saw, I think a lot of solution, a lot of the problems that we saw, not all of them, mind you, but a lot of them, if we extended this generosity, extended this kindness, extended more of the compassion for one another. We're at times you kind of watching all what was going on and going, I have the answer. Like, I was wondering if that was sort of your feeling and how much
It's funny.
those issues. Yeah.
So I don't feel like the person that always has the answer. I think that that can be a dangerous place to be. But I will tell you that as these things happened, I thought, if somebody would just say, I understand, or say, I hear you, or say, I don't understand, but I want to. That kind of generosity, I think, would go an amazingly long way. And I think, too, sometimes generosity and empathy go hand in hand. And a lot of times when people see folks who are pushing up against things, who are very frustrated, who are very angry, they take that as a negative. Whereas if you think of something non-threatening like a toddler,
Yep.
right? When a toddler's angry, at the basis of that is usually some need that isn't being met or fear. And if we look at people and situations, and when people are acting that way, like recently, fear that they won't get the vaccine and people are very angry, right? Whatever it is, if you can look at it that way and have empathy and understand that there were times in your life, because for all of us, this is true, that you didn't act in the way that made sense because you were coming from a place of being afraid or something like that, then you can, generously empathize with anyone. I may not agree with people because
Sure.
there are lots of folks I don't agree with,
Right.
but I can empathize with almost everyone and get to a place where I don't agree with your choice, but I understand how you got there.
Right. Right. And it's funny you talk about agreement because that's oftentimes seen as a bad thing, and
Hmm.
it really isn't. It's an exchange of ideas. We're seeing this in the political realm as an example, and I'm not trying to get political in any way, shape, or form, but I mean that
Right.
I think is a really good example where instead of showing that empathy, I think that one of the tactics we oftentimes see is a culture of blame. Well, it's your fault, or you didn't do this, and that is so. We talk about counterintuitive. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. That or vilifying someone because they don't think the way you do. Which it's funny when people talk about world peace, I think sometimes people get confused and think world peace means everyone thinks like me. And to me, world peace is we all think differently and we're all okay with that. We're all allowing everyone to have their different opinion. And again, not to get into politics because I agree with you, but there was a time when politicians would fiercely debate in a debate and then all go have dinner at the same person's house. And once the debate was over, they were friends. They weren't saying you're an awful person because you don't agree with my politics.
No, that's exactly. I think of their the Looney Tunes cartoon where the rooster and the sheepdog are chasing each other, and they punch a clock, it's over, and they go off like buddies. Like I think that's what we're talking about here in
Right?
terms of
I
just
think they
look.
had it right.
Yeah, no, we just go back to that. I think that's really what it is. I mean, it's not you're not to be hated. I shouldn't hate you because we're not on the same side. There
Right.
there are opportunities, and I think that's in all that's been going on. I think that's what's missed is the opportunity.
Yeah, well, the opportunity too that when people think differently than you, or they have a different background than you, they come from a different country, they're a different culture, they're a different race, because they see things differently, their input is immensely valuable because they're going to see things you don't see. and why we would want to discount that instead of listening and seeing how we can all be better, that I can't wrap my head around.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Me and you both. Me and you both. So for someone who's looking to so here in our conversation, we're talking about generosity, and we're talking about empathy, a little bit of trust. I think fills in what we've built into our conversation as well. How does someone implement that, whether that be in their professional life or even personal life? What's the starting point?
So I think a great starting point is talking to what they're working on. So, literally, whether you're a leader or you're doing it at home or you're doing it with your clients, it's starting to have conversations with them about what is important to them, even if that doesn't necessarily pertain to you personally or your business. But when you start giving your time, pouring into them and listening, that's where a lot of the magic happens. A lot of times when I go in and work with companies, the first thing I want to do is talk to the employees, to each and every one of them, just sit with them for an hour and ask them questions about, well, what do you love about your life? What is the most important thing to you? And the reason for that is because that's going to drive their behavior. That's going to drive what they value. So, for one person, getting a raise may be huge. For another, having more PTO might be huge. The way that we know these things is to listen to folks and ask those open ended questions that have nothing to do with their work or our product or what our goal is.
It's at the basic. I mean, as you describe it, it's just you're thinking it's just the basic core. From an interaction standpoint, reading humans, listen, share ideas,
Yeah.
understand, and empathize, and it's not complex. I think we all have it within our capacity to do.
Sure. Well, it sounds so easy that
Right.
people think, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense." And it's funny, there are some resources on my website that you can go and get for free, and one of them is literally 5 ways that you can do this, the kinds of questions that you can ask people so that you can start learning what would be important to them, and to take it completely away from business and things like this. Some of the folks who are known as the best gift givers literally just listen to the things people say all year long that they love, and then they go get them something that they forgot they mentioned 6 months ago, and they're like, wow, Jim always gets the perfect gifts.
Mm, that's awesome. No, hey, gifts are great, right? It's the perfect ones too.
But it's the listening. It's not even the item, because it
No,
could be something like,
that's right.
I love blue pens. Okay, great, I'm gonna get you a whole box of them.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and that resonates because you feel validated. You've been heard. You've been understood. You've been listened to. And really, who doesn't want to be listened to and be validated? So that totally is a great
Sure.
analogy for sure. For sure.
And understood, to your point. When people understand us, we feel a commonality and a bond that is super strong. It's why people tend to so much value their childhood friend group, or if they were in a fraternity, or they all like the same sports team, right? Those are the things that bond people together.
Got you. Got you. I've really enjoyed this chat, April. And before we go, I want to ask one last question around just success in general and this concept of what we're talking about. Because again, we talk about where things that there's correlations. Uh, this directly, and you would have you've seen in your work with businesses that there has been a change. There has been, whether it be an increase of sales or productivity or all of these things are markers. What if you sort of talk about the key when we talk about success and generosity?
So, the biggest thing about the success is it's a byproduct. And it's interesting because a lot of people drive for success and they do so many things for success. With this, you're really driving towards making people feel valued, helping them understand how important they are. And then you cannot help but be successful. And I'll give you a really dramatic example. I worked with a trucking company that was losing close to $500,000 a year. I mean, they were in a bad place. And the first thing we did was listen to some of the requests from their most problem customers, in the sense that they were the most unhappy. And what they wanted was a higher level of service than was common in the trucking industry. But by doing that, listening to them and giving them that, they were quickly able to get the company to be profitable in less than 6 months, and then develop a niche way of serving that allowed them to grow and then eventually sell that company in a really short period of time. And that all came from that place of, how can I give you more? You're unhappy. What can I do to help?
Mm. The listening, it goes right back to that again. The listening and the asking those probing questions to get to the heart of the matter. And that's what we're talking about here, April.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Oh, this has been incredible. I'm really appreciative. And we sort of in our short chat here, we've gone from mentorship all the way through to listening. Actually, I want to go back. I did say one question. One more thing I wanted to ask you, because you talked about the impact
Sure.
Sue had on you, and I'm wondering that did you have an opportunity to go back and let her know sort of the difference that she made in your life? Because I think in a big part of this is letting those individuals know where they've made a difference. And did you get a chance to do that?
Absolutely. So, a lot of times personally, I let her know how much she had done for me. And then when it comes to the generosity culture, I always talk about her. And I have a book coming out in March called Magic Blue Rocks, and it's dedicated to her. And it also tells the story of what she did in my life and what the long term impact was, and how people can leverage what she taught me to be successful in their own life.
Amazing. It's great to hear. Happy to hear the book is coming out. Happy to hear that you have been able to get a chance to share that with her, because again, I think it's just so important as
You
you
know what?
into people.
You know what I think is so interesting, and I have to share this with you
Yeah.
because I was so shocked to hear it.
Uh-huh.
When I told her, she didn't think she'd done anything special.
Mm.
That's just how she was. She would have done that for any child that she encountered in that situation, and in fact had done it for others.
Wow.
And for her, it was just a Tuesday.
Wow. That is significant on so many levels, because oftentimes, within ourselves, we just do the things that are just natural and mundane to us, so to speak. But to other people, it's seen as this eureka, and in some instances, life-changing experience and moment. So I think that's incredible. And the fact that she just like, oh, but I'm wondering if she even remembered the things that she did, even because they were so ordinary to her.
She remembered, and I think she remembered because I would always come back to her and say, this happened and this happened. But to her, it wasn't extraordinary. And my goal in life is to live my life in such a way that I can make an extraordinary impact by not doing anything extraordinary, by it just being me being normal for myself.
That's awesome. April, thank you again for this. To our listeners, April's got all, as you mentioned, maybe give your website. You'd mentioned you have some good resources on your site for our listeners where they can go and learn more about the culture.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
It's drivenoutcomes.com.
Awesome. April, thanks so much for this. Much appreciated, and all the best.
Oh, thank you. Same to you.
Back we are here on the Audacious Living podcast, and I want to first off say thank you to April for being so generous with your time and joining us here on the podcast. I think you've nicely given us a good picture of what the generosity culture is all about, and I think everyone has a better understanding of what it means moving forward. Now, I want to zero on a piece that April touched on, because she touched on a lot of really key points, but the one that stands out in my mind is her point around empathy. We heard April talk about different things that we can do to practice empathy, but one of the things that she mentioned that makes so much sense to me involves adjusting the way we look at people and trying to do so from a position of understanding and empathy. And she gave the example of a toddler, and when oftentimes the little toddler is crying, from that standpoint, look at the reasons behind that, and stay away from judgments and anything of that nature. And I love this because empathy is important, because it helps us to better connect with others and how they're feeling. And in turn, that's one of the things that allows us to respond better to them. It's definitely one of those things that we can never have too much of, and we can always put into practice, especially when we're dealing with one another. Speaking of never having too much, I can say the exact same thing for this podcast. We can go on and on and on, but we've reached the end of another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Thank you, as always, for checking us out. My appreciation goes out to the listeners and viewers, because all of you are what keeps this podcast going. So thank you for your time. Of course, you can go to bestaudaciouslife.com if you happen to miss any past episodes. They're all there, and you can get caught up pretty quickly with all the good stuff that we have coming out. And so, having said that, we've reached the end. So thank you. And until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to others, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.